Welcome back to History Otherwise, where we explore the paths not taken in history.
It's good to be back. And today, well, we are tackling a scenario that is, you could argue, sort of the patient zero of modern British political angst.
We certainly are. We're looking at a single invitation sent back in 1955 and the decision to, well, decline it. We're exploring the alternate timeline where the UK didn't just join the EEC later on, but was actually there from the start.
A founding member.
An architect of the whole system.
It is the ultimate what if, because if you pull on that one thread, if Britain just says yes in 1955, you don't just change a trade deal. Sure. You unravel and reknit the entire fabric of the last 70 years.
The economy, the culture.
The Constitution, and definitely the arguments we're still having right now.
It's a massive topic. So for you listening, we're going to structure this deep dive into 3 distinct acts, just to keep us on track.
Good idea.
First, we need to understand the crime scene, so to speak, the 1955 decision itself. Why did Britain say no? Then second, we'll look at the British watermark.
How a British presence would have changed
That's
Europe.
Exactly. How it would have physically rewritten the European DNA.
And third, which is maybe the most personal part, we have to look at how that decision changes Britain itself. The money in our pockets, the food on our plates, even the stability of the United Kingdom.
So let's go to that scene of the crime, June 1955, Messina, in Sicily.
Right.
The foreign ministers of the 6, that's France, Germany, Italy, the Benelux countries, they're all gathering. It's hot, it's humid, and they're trying to build a common market. Now, I've often heard this grievance that Britain was shut out, that the Europeans formed a clique and just locked the door. Is there any truth to that?
Not at all, no. That is a comforting myth we tell ourselves. The reality is the Europeans were practically begging Britain to attend.
Maybe.
You have to remember, in 1955, Germany is still recovering from, well, total devastation. France is politically unstable. They wanted British diplomatic weight, and crucially, they wanted British markets. We were explicitly invited.
So the door was wide open. And we didn't send the Prime Minister, Anthony Eden, or the Chancellor.
No, and this is where history just turns on a dime. We sent a man named Russell Brotherton, a civil servant from the Board of Trade.
Okay.
Now, by all accounts, Brotherton was a very capable, very intelligent man. But in the language of diplomacy, sending a mid-level functionary to a meeting of foreign ministers is, well, it's a deliberate insult. It's a message.
It's like sending an intern to a merger negotiation.
Precisely, between CEOs. His instructions were explicit. Observe, do not commit, and frankly, just try to pour cold water on the whole thing.
And his parting words, they're famous, aren't they?
Legendary. He stands up, packs his briefcase, and tells the future founders of the EU, gentlemen, you are trying to negotiate something you will never be able to negotiate.
Wow.
If you do negotiate it, you will never be able to ratify it. And if you do ratify it, it will never work.
That has to go down as one of the worst predictions in political history.
Yeah.
But why? Was it just arrogance, or was there actually a logic to it?
It looks like arrogance to us now, but at the time, it was a strategic calculation. It was based on the 3 circles doctrine. This is vital to understand.
The 3 circles.
The British establishment, Churchill, Eden, Macmillan, they saw Britain as this unique intersection of 3 great circles. The Empire and Commonwealth, the special relationship with America, and then finally, Europe.
And the logic was you can't hug one circle too tightly without letting go of the others.
Exactly that. And if you look at the hard data from 1955, you can kind of see their point. 47% of UK exports were going to the Commonwealth.
Almost half.
Yeah. New Zealand, Australia, Canada, India. Only about 25% went to Western Europe. So the Treasury looked at the ledger and said, why would we shackle ourselves to a war-torn continent when we have this global trading network?
Follow the money. It makes sense on a spreadsheet in 1955.
It did. But it was a static analysis. It just failed to see that the Commonwealth trade was stagnant, relying on old historical ties, while Europe was about to experience the Wirtschaftswunder, the economic miracle. They bet on the past instead of the future.
And there is a deep irony in that, isn't there?
Oh, a tragic one. The leadership believed joining the European project would constrain Britain, that it would limit our global reach. In reality, by staying out, we lost our voice in the one circle that was growing.
So we ended up with less influence everywhere.
Diminished influence in Washington because we weren't the bridge to Europe anymore, and the Commonwealth naturally drifted away anyway. Staying out was the path to irrelevance.
So let's intervene. Let's step into the timeline and change that one decision. It's 1955. Prime Minister Anthony Eden looks at the invitation to Messina. Instead of sending the civil servant with the wet blanket, he sends a heavy hitter, let's say a senior cabinet minister, with a real mandate to negotiate.
That changes the chemistry of the room immediately. Britain pulls up a chair at the Chateau de Val-Duchesse where the Treaty of Rome is actually being written. We aren't observers anymore.
We're co-authors.
We're co-authors.
And this brings us to that second part of our deep dives, the British watermark. If we're holding the pen, what does the European project actually look like? Because in reality, the EU has always felt very French, centralized, bureaucratic, agricultural.
You've hit the nail on the head. The real Treaty of Rome was driven so heavily by the French and this federalist vision of people like Paul-Henri Spaak. They wanted ever closer union, a political project.
And if Britain is there?
If Britain is there in 1955, we kill that idea in the cradle.
We kill the federalist dream.
We dilute it massively. The British delegation would have insisted on an association of sovereign states. Think about the institutions. The European Commission. In our timeline, it became this powerful executive engine proposing laws. A British-designed commission would likely have been a weak secretariat, basically a civil service to organize meetings for the national governments.
So the power stays with the member states. No Brussels bureaucracy telling London what to do.
Exactly. The Council of Ministers, where the national politicians sit, would hold all the cards. And think about the geopolitics. The history of the EU is the history of the Franco-German axis. But if Britain is a founder, you don't get an axis. You get a triangle.
A triumvirate.
A triumvirate. London, Paris, Bonn.
That completely changes the dynamic for Charles de Gaulle, doesn't it? Because in the real world, when he comes to power in France in '58, his first big move is to veto Britain joining. He keeps us out for a decade.
And in this world, he arrives in 1958, and Britain is already sitting at the head of the table. He can't veto a member. He's stuck with us. And ironically, the sources suggest they might have gotten along strangely well. De Gaulle hated supranational power. He wanted a Europe of nations.
Britain would have been his ally.
His natural ally in limiting the power of Brussels.
But surely not on economics. De Gaulle wanted to protect French farmers. Britain always wanted cheap food.
And that is the biggest tangible difference for the average person. The Common Agricultural Policy, the CAP. In reality, this thing became a monster of subsidies that kept food prices artificially high to protect French and German smallholders. Britain hated it.
So if we're in the room...
If we are founding members, the CAP never becomes that monster. We would have fought for the British housewife. That was the political phrase of the time. We'd have insisted on cheap imports from the Commonwealth.
So cheaper butter, cheaper lamb, and much less money sent to French farmers.
Much less. The CAP becomes a pale shadow of what it was historically. You wouldn't have the butter mountains and the wine lakes. The whole budget of the EEC would have been significantly smaller because Britain would have refused to sign off on a protectionist racket.
That leads us nicely into the third part of our discussion, a nation remade. Because if the rules of the club are different, the impact on the members is different. Let's talk about the British economy.
Right, and this is where we have to talk about the cold bath.
A cold bath sounds unpleasant.
It is, initially.
Yeah.
But economists argue it was necessary. In our real timeline, Britain just sort of drifted in the 50s and 60s. British industry cars, steel, coal was inefficient, protected by Commonwealth tariffs, hiding from real competition. We didn't join the EEC until 1973.
Which is just terrible timing.
The worst timing. We joined just as the oil crisis hit. We walked into a burning building and then got blamed for the fire. But in this alternate 1955 timeline, the tariff walls come down in the late 50s. British factories are suddenly exposed to German and Italian competition a whole decade earlier.
So sink or swim time.
Exactly. And some would sink. You'd see bankruptcies in the Midlands in, say, 1960. It would be painful politically for the Macmillan government. But the argument goes the survivors would be forced to modernize, to automate, to invest.
So by the time you get to the 1970s...
British industry isn't the sick man of Europe. It's lean, it's integrated, and it's booming right alongside Germany.
So we avoid the 1970s as we knew them. The three-day week, the strikes...
Likely mitigate the worst of it, yeah. We are synchronized with the European boom and the City of London. It becomes the undisputed financial capital of the common market from day one. In the real world, the city had to fight to catch up. In this world, it writes the banking rules for the continent.
That paints a picture of a wealthier Britain, certainly. But money's one thing, identity is another. You mentioned earlier this changes who we are.
Oh, absolutely. Think about the cultural osmosis. In the real timeline, Britain was culturally pretty isolated well into the 70s. The food was notorious, boiled vegetables, gray meat, wine was exotic.
Right.
If we have free movement of goods starting in 1958, that all changes.
We get olive oil and espresso in the 1960s instead of the 1990s.
You get olive oil in every town by the time the Beatles are recording Rubber Soul, but more importantly, you get people moving. If the British middle class is traveling and working in France and Germany freely from the late 50s, language skills completely shift.
Right, because we are notoriously terrible at languages. We just expect everyone to speak English.
Because we were late to the party. If business is integrated early, fluency in French or German becomes a standard career requirement, not some rare party trick. The sources describe the development of a layered identity.
Layered identity.
You're Welsh and British and European, and there's no contradiction. It feels natural because it's all you've ever known.
Speaking of being Welsh or Scottish, this is a sensitive point. The relationship between the nations of the UK and Europe has always been tricky. Does a founding membership change the union itself?
Fundamentally, in the real world, Scotland and Wales often felt ignored by Westminster, and later they looked to Brussels as a sort of counterbalance. In this timeline, British negotiators would likely have set up regional development funds in the early 60s to help those industrial areas surviving that cold bath we mentioned.
So Cardiff and Edinburgh are getting checks and recognition from Brussels 40 years earlier.
Checks, influence, direct links, it changes the entire flavor of nationalism. Instead of a push for separation from the UK to rejoin Europe, which is what we see in Scotland today, it becomes a push for autonomy within the stable framework of Europe. The constitutional friction is just lubricated by European prosperity.
But the biggest constitutional friction, the most dangerous one, has always been Northern Ireland.
This is the most profound insight from the analysis, and we do need to be careful here, but the implications are just staggering. In the real timeline, the border between Northern Ireland and the Republic was a hard border. Customs posts, barriers, a physical manifestation of division.
And later, a target for attacks.
Exactly. But if Britain joins the common market in 1955, and Ireland inevitably follows suit to maintain trade, that economic border dissolves in, roughly 1957?
1957. That is a full decade before the Troubles really ignite in the late 60s.
Think about what that means. For 10 years, farmers are trading across the line. Goods are moving freely. The border becomes a line on a map, not a physical barrier on the road. Now, we have to be clear. We aren't saying a trade deal erases 400 years of sectarian history. The anger is still there.
Of course.
But the symbolism of the hard border is gone.
It removes the focal point.
It creates a lived reality of cooperation. If you have 10 years of invisible borders before the civil rights marches begin, the conflict might lack that same explosive containment. It could potentially soften the violence. It might have brought about something like the Good Friday Agreement decades earlier.
That is a heavy thought. The idea that a tariff decision in 1955 could have saved thousands of lives.
It was the founding principle of the European project, after all. Peace through integration. We often forget that it wasn't just about the price of steel, it was about stopping people from shooting each other.
So let's fast forward. We've rebuilt the economy, softened the borders, we arrive in the 21st century. In our timeline, this is where the wheels come off. Maastricht, the euro, the backlash, and eventually 2016.
In this timeline, the B-word Brexit simply doesn't exist. It's a non-concept.
But surely the anti-European sentiment would still be there. The tabloids, the fear of losing sovereignty.
But ask yourself, what is the core slogan of Brexit? Take back control. That slogan only works if you feel you have lost control, that things are being done to you by faceless people in a foreign city.
And in this world, we are the ones in that city.
We are the faceless people. We helped write the rules. We designed the commission. We restricted the budget. You can't run a campaign on taking back control when you've been holding the pen for 50 years.
What about the euro? That was a huge flashpoint. Would we have joined?
The sources suggest probably not. The City of London would likely still have insisted on retaining the pound for monetary independence, but, and this is the key, it wouldn't have been a hostile opt-out. It would have been a structured, calm arrangement negotiated by a leader of the bloc. Britain would be the friendly neighbor to the Eurozone, not the skeptical heckler from the sidelines.
And when the 2008 financial crisis hits, in the real world, the Eurozone nearly collapsed.
And in the real world, Britain sat on the sidelines, partly gloating, partly terrified. In this timeline, the UK uses the city's massive integrated expertise to lead the rescue. We put out the fire because it's our house too. It just fundamentally shifts the definition of sovereignty.
That's a term we throw around a lot. Sovereignty. It gets very philosophical.
It does, but it's practical too.
Yeah.
In our real history, we came to view sovereignty as splendid isolation. The idea that you're only sovereign if you can say no to everything and hoard power in Westminster. In this alternate world, sovereignty is viewed as maximizing influence.
It's the difference between shouting complaints from the driveway versus sitting at the dinner table and deciding what everyone eats.
That is a perfect analogy. And because we're at the table, the loudest arguments of the 21st century, the division, the toxicity, the paralysis of Brexit, they just vanish. The energy we spent fighting about Europe is energy we could have spent leading Europe.
It's almost tragic to think about all that wasted energy.
It is, but it's also a lesson. We tend to look at history as inevitable. We think, oh, the British are just islanders. We were never going to fit in. But the record shows that wasn't true. It wasn't DNA. It was policy.
A policy decided by a handful of men in a room in 1955.
Men who chose the path of least resistance. They chose the comfortable status quo of the empire over the hard work of building the future. And that quiet withdrawal turned out to be the most consequential decision of the century.
It really makes you wonder. We're looking at our own challenges today. AI, climate change, global security.
Exactly. What are the quiet decisions being made right now in boring meeting rooms we'll never see that will lock in the trajectory for the next 50 years? Are we engaging or are we sending observers?
That is a provocative thought to leave us with. A huge thank you for guiding us through this fascinating what if.
It's been a real pleasure.
And thank you for listening, because history might have turned otherwise.